The curse of the virus. It all started when the heroes of Sprunki, a team of explorers used to facing dangerous creatures and deadly traps in their adventures, stumbled upon an old abandoned laboratory in the darkest corners of their world. The lab had long been considered destroyed, but something caught their attention, unusual signals coming from deep within the building. In search of new artifacts, they entered, unaware that their actions would lead to their doom. Inside it was dark and foul-smelling. As they began to explore the rooms, they found strange devices that had once been used to create viruses. On one of the old computer screens, a message flashed, "Virus, Sprunk 13, high activation risk, destroy." But it was too late. Before they could examine all the documents, the screen suddenly lit up with a bright flash, and the air vibrated strangely. It was the virus, long dormant, now awake and waiting for its moment. It infiltrated their systems and instantly began to alter their bodies and minds. Andre, the team leader, felt the first symptoms immediately. His hands began to turn black and crack as if they had become metal. This wasn't just an infection. The virus was affecting his body, turning it into something entirely different. Miranda, the experienced biologist, tried to analyze the changes, but soon her eyes began to glow a bright violet. She could no longer control her body, which was now under the influence of a strange, ominous force. Thomas, the weapons expert, noticed that his skin was covered in strange patterns and his strength had doubled. He felt an uncontrollable rage bubbling inside him, forcing him to act aggressively like a beast. All that was left for the team was to try and find a way to stop the virus, which had already begun to seize control of their minds. But the deeper they ventured into the laboratory, the stranger their transformations became. They began losing their human traits, turning into beings that resembled mutants more than people. Reaching the heart of the laboratory, the heroes discovered the last message from the scientists, revealing a terrifying truth. The virus wasn't just a weapon, it was an experiment to create new life forms, and its goal was to merge all living beings into a single consciousness, devouring everything in its path. The team realized that if they didn't stop the virus, they would not only die, but become part of this all-consuming nightmare. They made a desperate decision. They would destroy the laboratory and the virus along with themselves. The explosion they caused consumed everything. However, weeks later, strange creatures began appearing in the world, their eyes glowing violet, their bodies no longer bearing any human shape. The curse of the virus had not been destroyed, it had only transferred. And now, wherever these mutants appeared, the eyes of the old heroes from Sprunki still lived on inside them.
The curse awakens. Months had passed since the explosion that had destroyed the laboratory and seemingly ended the terrifying virus. The world, still reeling from the chaos, began to heal. The strange creatures that had emerged from the wreckage were thought to be the last remnants of the virus's twisted legacy. But, in reality, the virus had only evolved, mutating into something far more insidious. It started with whispers. Strange occurrences began happening across the world. Cities that had once been thriving with life began to see their populations dwindle, as if something was driving people to vanish without a trace. The infected mutants, now far more intelligent and strategic, began to form secretive groups, their glowing violet eyes flickering like shadows in the night. They were hunting. Adela, a young and fearless survivor, had heard rumors about the mutants, but she never imagined they were connected to the old laboratory. She had grown up in a small, isolated village, far from the chaos that had once spread across the land. But the peace was short-lived. One night, after hearing a blood-curdling scream from a neighboring cabin, she ventured outside to find a scene that would haunt her forever. The once peaceful villagers were now twisted, their eyes glowing violet, their movements unnaturally precise. They no longer resembled the people she knew. They were changed. Adela ran, barely escaping the horrifying sight, and began her search for answers. In her travels, she encountered Dr. Helena, a former scientist who had once worked at the laboratory before its destruction. Dr. Helena, now a recluse, had isolated herself in a remote mountain hideout, knowing that the virus, though seemingly destroyed, had not been eradicated. She revealed the truth. The virus was not just a physical affliction, but a parasite that latched on to the very essence of its victims. It altered not only their bodies, but their souls, merging them into one collective mind. While the original heroes of Sprunki had destroyed the lab, they had unknowingly left behind the core of the virus, a living consciousness that was now growing stronger and more dangerous. The virus had found a new host, Adela. Terrified, Adela began to notice strange things happening to her. Her thoughts weren't entirely her own anymore, and her body had begun to exhibit signs of mutation. She could feel the presence of the old heroes, their minds intertwined with the virus, clawing at the edges of her consciousness. They were trying to take control, but there was something different about Adela. Unlike the others, she had an unusual immunity to the virus. But to do so, she would need to journey back to the ruins of the lab, now overrun with the mutated remnants of humanity. As Adela ventured deeper into the heart of the infected territory, she encountered other survivors, people who had escaped the virus, but who were now hunted by its relentless minions. Among them was Kai, a former soldier who had once fought in the war against the infected. He had seen firsthand the horrors that the virus unleashed and was determined to help Adela in her quest. Together, they fought their way through mutant hordes and strange, unexplainable phenomena. The closer they got to the ruins of the laboratory, the more Adela could feel the virus's influence tightening its grip on her mind. The voices of the heroes, now twisted, their wills shattered by the virus, whispered in her ears, urging her to give in. But she couldn't. Not yet. When they finally reached the remains of the lab, they discovered the true horror. The core of the virus had fused with the very fabric of the earth, feeding off the remnants of the lab's destruction. It was no longer just a virus. It had become an ancient entity, a living, breathing force that could infect everything it touched. In that moment, Adela knew what she had to do. She couldn't just destroy the core. She had to sacrifice herself to the virus, allowing it to consume her completely. Only then could the cycle be broken, and the last vestiges of the virus be erased from the world. As the entity reached out to claim her, she felt the presence of the old heroes one last time. Their minds finally at peace, no longer slaves to the virus. With a final, resolute breath, she allowed the infection to take her. The earth shook as the virus was finally consumed by the sacrifice. The world would never be the same, but for the first time in a long while, there was hope. The curse of the virus was broken, its influence no longer capable of spreading. But the question lingered in the air. Could something that powerful ever truly be destroyed?